Alright, so today's video is going to be another opinion video, and sort of the idea or the general concept that I'm going to be covering is the Oi influence, or for those of you who don't know what Oi is, the sort of skinhead like music genre, the influence of that style that has crept into black metal, specifically NSBM, and at that, Eastern European, particularly Hellenic black metal, to be as specific as possible. Now, for those of you who don't have terribly much experience with this style of music, and I do listen to a fair bit, not enough to cut off my hair for, but still a decent amount. Every so often I'll sort of go on a kick of it, but what is Oi defined by exactly? Now, it's kind of an interesting mix of some punk rock elements, some rock elements, and also some reggae elements like in the beats of some of the songs. I know that there was a strong influence on the growth of the skinhead like music movement, I guess, was actually Jamaican in origin, even though you see a lot of the bands that typify the skinhead movement now, skinhead movement music genre, I don't know, in Northern Europe, the United States, Canada, Great Britain, so on and so forth. Although some of the more like the sharp types will try and say that everyone should just bring it back to the Jamaican artists and abandon the racks and the rock against communism types and the NS types, which are who this video is going to be focusing on. But I just wanted to give that whole preamble to talk about the fact that contrary to what some people believe, there's more to the skinhead genre and culture than white supremacy, and the whole rock against communism thing. However, I want to get that out of the way because that portion of the genre will be the focus of this video. Now, I'd like to point out this is it's interesting to note because black metal and second wave black metal, and particularly Burzum, which is funny because people often say that Varg Vikernes sort of opened the door for more right wing individuals to enter the genre, but here we have the largest and the largest concentration of right wing ideology in black metal, and it rejects the notion that I was getting at with Burzum, that with his Varg's albums like Vislice, Ataros, Asker, all that sort of rejects the rock elements that was influencing pretty much all metal, the punk elements that influenced thrash metal and kind of death metal with the vocals a little bit, and so his music was a rejection of that. Now this brings, which is what black metal is defined around, from the second wave onwards, in many people's eyes, mine included. But then this introduction of the sort of Oi sound is sort of going back on that, so I find that odd. That's the first observation I could make. Secondly, I think I'll talk about sort of who I can give as an example for this, and the two most evident bands that I see this in would have to be Destroma from Greece, which is why I say the Hellenic scene, because it's also Bannerwar, it's also Wolfnacht, it's also pick a Greek band with the possible exception of Octonomos, and you're looking at some Oi black metal. And the second great example is Absurd, because if you actually look Absurd up, there'll be a lot of terms that have a great deal of overlap. You'll have black metal, pagan black metal, Viking metal, NSBM, and then you just have rock against communism. Well, where did that come from? Well, it came from the influence from the skinhead movement, because rock against communism started as sort of a series of concerts in the 1970s in England, I believe, with bands like the Dentists, bands like Screwdriver, who were they're skinhead bands associated with the White Power movement and rock and well anti-communist themes, and get that, and National Socialism in particular. Um, but so now we've seen where and you also find this, like I said, particularly in Eastern Europe. Some other examples would be the Aryan Terrorism Project, which was the vocalist of Nocturnal Mortem back in 2003. Back when that band and those individuals were National Socialists, they've since rejected it. And you can sort of see this because it doesn't sound like Ukrainian black metal. Yeah, it sounds nothing like Dodka, nothing like Hate Forest, nothing like Nocturnal Mortem. Those are the only three I can think of off the top of my head. But it sounds like more like Absurd or Dash Doma than it does bands from its own country. Goatmoon has a few tracks that sort of sound this way. But it was funny because in the comments, everyone was calling Black Goat Grave Desecrator like G.G. Allen because it sounded like a punk song that was just really raw. Which, I mean, it's kind of funny. But moving on. So yeah, there we have, and so and this is why I say Eastern Europe, because we have the Greek scene, the a Ukrainian band, and a Finnish band are my top examples of this. Whereas some Western bands that are National Socialistic, like the early, I think it was early, yeah, like the Peste Noir, Pest Noir, it's Pest Noir. Just found out it's Pest Noir, because Peste would be more of a German pronunciation, but getting Action Totenkopf, also French, like Pest Noir, Völkermord, which is English, even though the name is in German. And I know my accent isn't quite perfect. I'd studied German for 4 years, but it's been a little while, and I haven't really practiced speech I haven't really practiced it in a great length of time. But yeah, so my accent's gonna be a bit off for anyone that's more fluent than I. Feel free to correct my pronunciations. I always do like to learn these things. But getting back to the point at hand, and some more Western bands, and I can just keep going on and naming Western bands that like this. And another thing to note, I'm not talking about blasphemy. I'm not talking about the Ross Bay skinheads, and I'm certainly not talking about Antichrist Kramer. Because first of all, I don't actually believe that he's even into white identity, white power, National Socialism, even romanticism. I don't think he's about any of that stuff. That's just my reading of him through the limited information I have, mostly just his music. However, you also see this in the West. You can see this in a band like Command, who, when I first encountered them, it was on the split with Enrique the Ensign Gas Fumes and Dash Drama and Fogged by Flesh Flies. And Command, when I first heard them, they sort of had that sort of gruff, like oi sound that was it's a bit throaty. So it's like, okay, and they had a more of like the riffs had more of like a raw punk sound to them. And when I went back and listened to Command, it's crazy how perception can like change my opinion about something, because I really didn't like it. I really didn't like what I heard when I first listened to Command, because I was associating with that Eastern European oi black metal, which I don't think works very well, with the exceptions of Wolfnacht, Aryan Terrorism, and Goatmoon when he does it. Those are some of those bands I actually do enjoy the music of. But I really didn't think much of Command because that's who I was associating with. But then when I realized they were Brazilian, I started associating the really raw instrumentals and the vox that was really gruff and throaty with Brazilian war metal, and I was like, oh, it's all good now. So they're another band, because every time I listen to them, I sort of want to compare them to Akitsa, and I want to compare them to the Templars, who are an oi band, with incidentally not associated with National Socialism. but that's also slightly beside the point. So far I sort of identified that where this sound comes from, the types of bands, and the geographic location that sort of has bands that typify this. And now I think I'm going to talk about the reasons why. Now, the first of these reasons is that the whole mystique around this genre, or this whole, I guess, zeitgeist maybe, especially with Rock Against Communism and the whole white power movement within the Oi genre, is that it's sort of like an underground type of resistance. Like if you listen to some of these songs, particularly from a band called English Rose, but if you look at some of their songs, like they're always going on about the red music industry, the communist music industry, how they're being held down, and it's sort of with NSBM, the focus is of course on politics and actually getting their message out there. So if you can take elements of a genre that's about sort of underground, repressed political sentiment, and in a format that's a lot easier on the ears, easier for people to listen to understand what you're saying and what you're about, then there's really no reason not to adopt it. You can also see with this that black metal bands, because like the vocals are usually the harsh screams and the growls, and it's usually not too great of production, they'll usually include symbols pertaining to what they're about in the logo. Like you'll have inverted crosses, you'll have pentagrams. I know some DSBM bands include nooses and razor blades. Thy Light and Happy Days come to mind. But with these bands, take Moonblood, for instance, who doesn't do this whole Oi sound. They have two Celtic wheel crosses in their logo. Aryan Terrorism, of course, has the two rifles on either side. Wolfnacht has the symbol of, I forget what it's called, but the symbol of the Golden Dawn, sort of front and center, right in the center of it. It might be surrounded by a laurel. I don't recall. Dash Drummer, of course, just has like a plain font so you can read it. And if you know what the connotations of the words Dash Drummer and Sturm in general with sort of Nazi military organizations, iconography, and to this day with something like the Daily Stormer. But putting that aside, sort of just this more not coherent, but more the sound is more readily understood, I would say. Because, for instance, with all the Hellenic bands, Dash Drummer included, I pretty much knew what they were about. Sort of just looking at their imagery, and then I could, understand a lot more of the lyrics when I was listening to their songs. And even with Command, where I wasn't entirely sure that they were, or where they were from, or who they were, or who he is. I believe it's only one person, but who I didn't really understand where this band is from. I sort of knew they were in that vein of thought because, however, I'll tell you, I did think that they were Italian and that they might have been about Italian fascism, because they use a lot of the imagery of like terrorism and terror, which, once again, going back to how the mind perceives things, I associated with the sort of covert, like paramilitary terrorist activities in Italy after Mussolini's government was replaced. The type of stuff that Julius Evola was involved in to some degree. But it turned out to be from they turned out to be from Brazil, with bands like Goat Penis, Segas Vendera, who use this whole type of terrorist iconography as well, which once again makes sense, and sort of, I don't know, I kind of started to like them better once I realized they were Brazilian, honestly, because there are a lot of great Brazilian bands, and there are also loads of non-Brazilian bands that I can compare command to, not ideologically, because I've already been doing that for this whole video, but sonically. But that's, once again, getting off of the topic here. So overall, I've looked at the geographical locations where these bands sort of tend to originate from, which I've noted that it's interesting because it's Eastern Europe compared to Western Europe, where you find a lot of actual skinheads who don't associate themselves with black metal or even National Socialism per se. So I've looked at the geographical locations, the defining characteristics, of course, and why I think this happens. Just let me know your thoughts on, I guess, my delivery, the ideas I'm presenting, whether you think I'm right or wrong, whether it's something like you'd like to add, anything of that nature. If you liked the topic, if you liked my delivery, consider liking, consider subscribing, take a look at some of my other videos by all means. And that's going to be all for this video, and I will see you in the next one.